So I'm in Plum Village in the southwest of France. I've just seen a film called The Five Powers, and I've got here Gregory Kennedy-Salemi, who's a co-producer and director of the film, and he's going to explain to us a little bit about this film. So what exactly is The Five Powers?
The Five Powers is a film about superheroes of peace. The main protagonists are Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Zen master, who corresponded with Martin Luther King Jr. In the early 60s. Alfred Hassler, who also worked with Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1950s on the Montgomery Story comic book. And Sister Chan Khong, who is a Vietnamese Zen master herself. Yeah.
And this film has taken a slightly unusual approach as well. You're mixing in sort of documentary with comic books. How did that all come about?
Yeah, the comic book idea came about as a result of discovering the Montgomery Story comic book, a comic book that was produced in the mid-'50s and used throughout the civil rights movement. So that inspired me to use the comic book as a medium in the film. And as we're also very big into transmedia, extending media across multiple platforms, the comic book and then the film, and then also a graphic novel that's coming. Yeah, it's a natural progression and also a way to expand the narrative. Yeah.
And these people, obviously, there can't be anyone on the planet who hasn't heard of Martin Luther King. Well, there probably will be, but many people have heard of him. The other people you mentioned are probably less well known. I mean, but give us a sense of who they are.
Well, Thich Nhat Hanh was highly respected by Martin Luther King Jr. and, in fact, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1967. Personalities like Oprah Winfrey, companies like Google. Thich Nhat Hanh is considered the father of mindfulness, who introduced mindfulness to North America especially. But he is a engaged Buddhist, invented and created engaged Buddhism when he was 16 years old in Vietnam, and has been working tirelessly ever since to plant seeds of nonviolence, truth, love, compassion, and mindfulness throughout the world. Alfred Hassler is one of the greatest American heroes you never heard of, and he had the idea for the Montgomery Story comic book, which is now re-emerging in the American press, and in Stanford University has an original copy of the book, and the Smithsonian. So.
And the Montgomery Story, just to put people in the picture, is that's Rosa Parks refusing to get up off the bus and getting arrested, and that being a spark for the civil rights movement.
Absolutely, and the Martin Luther King Montgomery Story comic book was used in the Tennessee lunch counter sit-ins to train the activists. This was the idea of Alfred Hassler, who then had the idea to go to Vietnam in the early 60s to find out exactly what was going on, to talk with nonviolent leaders. Two of those leaders were Thich Nhat Hanh and also Thich Quang, who was one of the most important Buddhist leaders and a friend of Thich Nhat Hanh in Vietnam.
And one of the extraordinary stories that you cover in the film, one that for Western audiences are sort of unbelievable and spectacular, is this question of self-immolation, or setting fire to oneself as a protest, as a political protest, as a non-violent act. Can you talk to us about that just a little bit as the last question?
Yes, I can. That question was asked to Thich Nhat Hanh in 1963 in a letter from Martin Luther King Jr., because they were corresponding. And Martin Luther King Jr. wrote that, for Americans, it's very hard to understand self-immolation. And I have to admit myself, it's something that was very hard for me to understand. But as I read about it, I began to understand it more. And from the Vietnamese perspective, it's like the ultimate way to bring attention to people that were suffering, and that the people who had decided to self-immolate, that was a decision that they made to let go of their body and to shine a light on all the suffering that was going on with their people. not something I would do, but it's something that I or recommend doing. But it is something that I respect deeply and have a better understanding of it now.
Gregory, thank you very much. We've got just the tiniest taste of this extraordinary piece of work you've done, and I say that because I've just watched it. If for people who want to find out more about the film, the distribution, the release in cinemas and festivals and things like that, the website is peaceisthewayfilms.com. I recommend you go and have a look at that for all these fascinating subjects and lots of material that gives the background, which we can only just touch on here. I'm Patrick Chalmers, and this is Plum Village Television.